Hello guys and girls, and welcome to today's lesson. As you can see here on the screen, the topic that we're going to be talking about today is on-demand writing terms. The reason that we're taking some time to review this today is because coming up in the very near future, you are going to be writing yet another on-demand, and it's been a while since we talked about this, so I wanted to give you guys just a quick refresher on all of the important words, the important terms that we need to know when we are writing on demand. Before we get into our terms, I did want to remind you or give you a heads up about our lesson target today. This is our goal, or what we are trying to accomplish through this lesson. My goal today is to remind you that on-demand writing is fun and magical. We all love on-demand writing, correct? Okay, I'm kidding. I know that on-demand writing is not the most exciting thing in the world. However, it is an important skill to have because it's very important to be able to come up with ideas and generate opinions on topics and being able to express your opinions clearly and concisely. And so even though on-demand writing may not be something that you really enjoy doing, it is an important life skill to have. Our real learning target today is not to remind you that on-demand writing is fun and magical. It is actually, like I've already said, just to refresh your memory on the key on-demand terms. It has been a while, and so I'm hoping that by doing this quick refresher, things are going to be just a little bit easier for you guys when you do actually write your on-demands coming up. So let's jump in and get started. The first term that I want to make sure we review today is the introduction paragraph. So hopefully you guys remember that when we are writing an on-demand essay, we have 5 paragraphs, and that first paragraph is called the introduction. I chose this video of the road today because writing an on-demand really is a journey, and that journey does start with the introduction. So it's the first paragraph of your essay. It has 3 elements in it. Those elements are the hook, the background information, and the thesis statement. And we're going to actually break each of those down because those are some very important key terms to remember. Let's talk about the hook first. The hook is the first sentence of the introduction, so it's the very first thing that your audience is going to read. And just like if you were going to go fishing and you would use a hook to catch a fish, when you are writing, the hook is meant to catch your reader's attention. There's a few different types of hooks that you could use. You could use a question, a surprising fact, or a short story. Either one of those are excellent hooks. The next part of the introduction paragraph after the hook is called the background information. This is 3 to 5 sentences in the middle of your introduction paragraph. Since it is 3 to 5 sentences, this is actually the biggest portion of the introduction paragraph, and it has 2 jobs. The background information should tell your audience what you're writing about and why they should care about that topic. I do want to remind you guys that we have some posters hanging up at the front of the room, and so I'm not going to go over the breakdown of the sentences that should be in your background information, but just remember that you can always look at those posters to help you with that. The last part of the introduction paragraph, and it's really just the most important part of your essay altogether, is your thesis statement. The thesis is the final sentence of the introduction paragraph. It gives your opinion on the topic with 2 reasons listed. So remember, 2 is the magic number that you want to keep in mind when you are writing your thesis statement. I use this video of this man working on the house because I want you to remember that your thesis statement is just like the foundation of a house. If you have a house that has a really strong and firm foundation, then that house is going to be able to stand and it's going to be very strong. Same thing with your essay. If you have a strong thesis statement, you are going to have a strong paper. But the opposite is also true. If you have a house that has a weak foundation, then that house is going to fall apart. If you have an on-demand that has a weak thesis statement, then that essay is going to fall apart. So it's really important to make sure that you really think about and spend some time crafting a really strong thesis statement. So that covers all of the parts of the introduction paragraph. We are going to continue on our journey here and talk about the next 2 paragraphs of the essay, which are your body paragraphs. So after your introduction, you have your first body paragraph and your second body paragraph. And the job of the body paragraphs is to elaborate and give more detail about the ideas in your thesis statement. So going back to what I said just a second ago, if you have a strong thesis statement, writing your body paragraphs is going to be very easy, because whatever that first idea is in your thesis, that's what your first body paragraph is going to be about. Whatever that second idea is in your thesis, that's what your second body paragraph is going to be about. So we're going to talk about the different parts of the body paragraph really quickly. Our body paragraphs are going to start with transition words. These are words at the beginning of the paragraph that help your reader move from one idea to the next. These transition words are pretty simple. They can be words like first, next, finally. And then right after that transition word, you're going to have your topic sentence. And the topic sentence is used at the beginning of the body paragraph. And the job of the topic sentence is to let your audience know what the rest of the paragraph is going to be about. This, again, goes back to the thesis statement. Whatever that first idea is in your thesis, that is what your first topic sentence is going to be about. And whatever that second idea is in your thesis statement, that's what your second topic sentence is going to be about. Right after your transition and your topic sentence, you're going to dive into your E1s and E2s. We've talked about this a lot this year. Even when we are doing our ERQs, we use this terminology, E1 and E2. So just a quick reminder here, E1 is your evidence, E2 is your explain. Your evidence comes straight from the text. You're going to cite it with quotation marks and a good sentence starter like the text says. And then your E2 is where you, in your own words, explain your evidence. And just remember that when you are writing your E2s, they should be at least 2 sentences long. After your first E1 and your first E2, you're going to have an internal transition. The job of the internal transition is to just help your audience move from whatever your first piece of evidence was to whatever your second piece of evidence is going to be. An internal transition could be something as simple as next or also, or you could break out some big words like furthermore or additionally. After your internal transition, you're going to have a second E1 and E2. So remember your body paragraphs, just like if we were doing an ABE, would have an E1 and E2 and then a second E1 and E2. So you put that internal transition in the middle. And then at the end of the paragraph, you have your concluding sentence. It's the last sentence of the paragraph, and its job is to just wrap up all of your ideas before you move on to something new. After we have our introduction and our 2 body paragraphs, the 4th paragraph of our essay is called the counter argument. The job of the counter argument is to introduce an opposing viewpoint and prove it wrong. So part of making a really strong argument is being able to prove someone on the opposite side wrong. That is what we do in a counter argument paragraph. And I'll just go ahead and tell you guys that before we actually write this on demand, we are going to take some time to review counter arguments a little more closely, just because as I was looking at your last on demands, that seemed to be kind of one of our weak areas. So we're going to be taking some time to review that in the near future. When we're thinking about our counter argument paragraphs, there's 2 terms that I want to make sure we understand. The first term is the opposing argument. So what I mean by that is, what's the argument from the opposing side that you are going to prove wrong? So again, you have to think, if someone was arguing against me, what would they say? And that's your opposing argument. The counter argument, on the other hand, is where you prove the opposing side wrong. So the opposing argument is just what the other side would say, and then the counter argument is how you could prove that wrong. I do want you guys to, just as a quick refresher, remember when we are writing our counter argument paragraph, remember our body paragraphs start with a transition word and a topic sentence, but the counter argument starts with an opposing argument and then your counter argument. The rest of the paragraph after that just follows the same format as the body paragraphs. So it's an E1 and E2, an internal transition, an E1 and E2, and then a concluding sentence at the end. To wrap everything up, that takes us to our final paragraph of the essay, which is the conclusion paragraph. The job of the conclusion is to just wrap up your essay. Most people, I think, like the conclusion paragraph the most because typically it's the shortest paragraph of the essay. It starts with your restated thesis, so you go back to the thesis that you wrote in the introduction, and you remind your audience of what that thesis statement was. Then you give a reference to the introduction, so you need to refer back to the introduction in some way. One easy way to do that would be if you asked a question in the introduction, you're going to answer that question at the end. And then last but not least, your conclusion paragraphs are going to end with a closing thought. This is just something that you can do to leave your audience thinking. You want them pondering on everything that you've said throughout your entire essay, and hopefully you've said enough that you have convinced them that your viewpoint is the correct viewpoint to have. That is going to be it for our review today. I'm hoping that this makes things just a little bit easier as we are moving forward, and that this was a good refresher for you so that you will feel confident and ready to go when we write our next on demand.